Thank you for joining us today at Miniature Wargaming Labs, and today we will be doing a painting tutorial on how to paint the Stormcast Annihilator from the new Dominion box. In particular, we'll be painting this little guy right here. Now the colors I primed him with Games Workshop's Zhandri dust. I then used Army Painter's Greedy Gold, P3 Solid Gold, Army Painter's Shining Silver, Vallejo Silver, Army Painter's Dragon Red, Necromancer Cloak, Ash Gray, Deep Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Electric Blue, Matte Black, then Citadel's Ionrach Skin, White Scar, and Mournfang Brown. And I used 3 different types of washes: Drakenhof Nightshade, Nuln Oil, Seraphim Sepia, and if you want to get the lightning bolts extra fancy, right there, I'm going to use Army Painter's Voidshield Blue to go underneath the white. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. To get started, I've primed my Annihilator in Zhandri dust. And the reason for that is I'm going to use some Greedy Gold from Army Painter, and I just want to put on 1 coat. So I'm going to take the Greedy Gold and just put 1 layer on everywhere we're going to see gold armor. And neatness does not count at this stage. That's why I'm using a messed with brush. We're now going to put on the next layer of gold, and that's going to be P3's Solid Gold. It's very similar to the Games Workshop Auric Armor. However, I've had this bottle for years. It never dries out. It's a lot bigger. So I'm going to use a dry brush. I'm not going to use a standard technique. I'm just going to... I didn't brush as much of it off, so see, I get a little bit, wipe it once, twice, and just deposit a little layer of gold. Helps if I show it on the camera. Like that. And I'm just hitting the parts. This is a giant brush, just the parts that this brush can easily hit. Anything else will just be too recessed. That will create a color difference that we're looking for. Now that we have our 2 layers of gold on, what I'm going to do is put a wash of Seraphim Sepia on it. And I've got my messed up sloppy brush. And so what I'm going to do is just dip it into the bottle and slop it on. Just 1 coat of this should do, or more depending on what kind of shade you want on it. And make sure to turn them upside down so there's no air pockets there, areas that the fluid doesn't wash into. Now while we wait for the wash to dry, I'm going to put on some sterling mud on the base to give it a little texture. And the reason being, I've got to wait long enough, might as well get these 2 both knocked out at the same time. So I'm going to take my little Citadel application tool and just put it around. Want to make sure not to touch the gold, though. It'll stain it. Just a little bit of texture. You can also use sand and glue. Now that everything's dried, I'm going to go back to my P3 Solid Gold here. and my dry brush. I'm just going to take a little bit of gold, wipe a lot of it off, and I just want to hit the parts of the plate where the light would be showing down. This will just create a graded effect. Now what I want to do is color the base, and for that I want to use Necromancer's Cloak. Poured some out in my palette here. I'm going to set my guy down on his handy little handle, and we'll just spin him around, covering the base as we go, and do one thick coat. Now I'm ready to move on to the silver portions, so I'm going to use Army Painter's Shining Silver. Already poured some out in my palette, so I'm just going to take my brush and hit the silver portions. So we've got his little male skirt, belt buckle, I want to do his hammer in silver too. And I like to do the little clasps and handle back here in silver. Next will be the blue, and we're going to use Army Painter's Deep Blue for that. And so I'm going to do the area of the shield here, between the gold and the starburst. Alright, and then I want to do, there's this little stretch in between all that gold armor. It's going to be blue. Alright, it takes a little work. I don't want to hit the gold on the spikes. So we'll carefully move in between those. Those are the only two blue areas we're going to do on this model. Now I want to use some white. In this case, it's going to be Ionrach skin. And I'm going to take my tiny tip brush here, and just using the side of it, I'm going to trace out this crescent moon. Slow and steady at this point. Now I'm going to use some Mournfang brown. Get this open. And I'm going to use this to do some of the belts and straps. So I'm going to use my tiny brush, so I can get in here without touching the silver on the belt buckle. And then it's hard to see in this particular version, but there's some straps on his forearm brace. So one quick swipe and we'll get those done. Then there's also, turn around here, there's that strap. And we're going to finish up the rest of the belt. Now I want to paint this little stone. So what I'm going to do is take some ash gray. And I've already put some in my palette. I want the stones to be this color. So we've got that done. Now I want to take some Drakenhof Nightshade and we're going to apply this over the blue. Wait, let's give it a good shake. I'm going to apply this over the blue and silver areas. So we'll take a brush, except the belt buckle, for a very good reason. So don't get it on the gold. Just run it through this track here. Without getting it on the gold, just on the blue. Just walk our brush through there, a little rosette. This little device here. And light little coat on the silver mail. I also painted this half, the shaft of the weapon brown. A nice, decent coat on the warhead. Various little trinkets. Now at this point, we're going to apply our Nuln Oil. Give that a shake. Get this thing open. And while we're waiting for the Drakenhof Nightshade, we'll put a little on the belt buckle, the belt. Basically the brown areas. We'll just get a line of this shade. Then the lid will stop closing on me. Put it on the rock. I'll switch to a bigger brush here. So I get one of my messed up brushes because I'm going to do a bunch on the base without touching the gold. So what I like about the Nuln Oil over the Necromancer gray is it really darkens up the gray but leaves the top. So you get kind of like that Tim Burton black with that. Okay, so there. Now we're going to let this guy dry, then we'll move on to the next step. Now we're going to take some Nuln Oil and we're going to darken down the leather straps and the base. So I'm going to use this regular brush just to run along belts here. Get that out of the way real quick. And then I'm going to switch to this brush and just run it along. Try not to get it on the gold. And I love what Nuln Oil does to Necromancer Cloak. It gives it that like Tim Burton black. Alright, now we're going to wait for all those shades to dry. Now I want to do the next layer of blue. So I'm going to use Army Painter's Ultramarine blue. Squeeze out a little bit my palette here. And let me switch to a smaller brush tip. That one's starting to lose it. So just a little bit. Moving quickly for some of these raised areas. I'll leave the deeper areas tinted one. Like that. And then we'll go on this side. We'll do a little bit inside that emblem. Not doing the blue inside the shield in the Ultramarines. We're going to do something a little bit different with that. Just a couple little streaks there. Give it a little depth. Now I want to do certain parts of his padding under his armor in black, and you really don't see this portion unless you're looking for it. So you see it at the joints. For example, in this model, it's on the back of his legs, inside of his the back of his knee here. So we're just going to paint his little protective suit black. There's a couple joints up around his armpits. See, that's his black bodysuit. Let's see, sometimes you can see the inside of the elbow joint. That looks to be it. But so just look around the different joints. You can find where his little suit is. Now I'm going to work on the gold and the silver and highlighting them. And for that, I'm going to use Vallejo's Silver. And the reason I like this silver is this is almost like pure silver flakes. Just super bright. And what I'm going to do is I am going to do kind of a highlight versus a dry brush here. So I got a little brush I've messed up. And just gonna kind of dry brush down the edges there, and then the other silver bits. So this makes it look like a blue tinted silver. Allows me to smooth out the Drakenhof nightshade in case any of it like pooled in a place I didn't want it to too much. There. But I'm also going to use the silver to highlight the gold. So and just where the light shines down, I put little hints of gold there. Top of the plates like that. Kind of put. It is a better way to show you just the top of the plate. Make it look more reflective. See, look at that. So this top of the plate is brighter than that part right there. So using this brush, I can alternate. And only want it where light really shines. So he's got his back half kicked out like that. There, do a little reflective line. Like that. And then we just go around, we burnish the plates to your liking. But honestly, less is more. Make sure to get little facial features. Now, as I let that silver set in, I'm going to use some electric blue. And I've already put it in here. And here we're just going to do the minutest of edge highlights. Something like that. Where I really save it for is, this will be the crackle and the lightning of the shield. So I just quickly highlight the edges, because this surface is really textured, and to show that off, I want to do this before I pull out the rest of the emblems. How bright you make these lightning bolts is to your taste. And then we'll put a little dot, not too much paint, over on this half moon. Now I'm going to go back to my old standby of Ionrach skin here, and I'm going to get the emblem's lightning bolts to pop out. But I want to cover over this blue, so the Ionrach is very good at covering up other colors. So we're just going to slowly and patiently work our way around. You run the rim of the circle, our tiny brush. Now we're going to use a red, and we're going to do some of the jewels. So I'm going to use Army Painter's Dragon Red, and use my tiniest brush. What I'm going to do is just draw in this. He's got a couple jewels around him. Now I'm going to use the same Dragon Red, and we're going to do the cross hatching on the grip there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a slightly wider brush, more beaten up, get some of the excess paint off of it, and I'm just going to hit the top edges. So some of the brown still shows through to help cover up any of the silver or gold that got on there before. Missed that. It's tough on this one to get back there. That means probably don't have to do it if no one can see it. There we go. Now what I want to do is those gems have had a little time to dry. So I'm going to take some Nuln Oil. And since I wasn't able to get a perfectly flat edge there, what I'm going to do is just put a dot of Nuln Oil in there, have it sink into the recesses of the setting. This will also tint the red, so it's a... Now we're going to use some Voidshield blue. We're going to start painting on our lightning detail. So I take my thin brush, I'm going to run the lightning detail through the cracks. I want one, this is my tiny brush, so I want the thickest line it'll paint. Alright, so let's go on this edge, get an idea for how I'm going to do the lightnings. So I want the lightnings to run from the gem to here. So you just start taking yours and running it in crazy zigzag patterns. I have a couple forks in the road here. That's what I like about the Voidshield blue. Great for this type of work. And just keep going around drawing the pattern as you like. Now we'll move on to our white. So go back to our layer of white scar. Citadel makes white paint, but I just have a bunch of this lying around. Now what we're going to do is take our thin brush again, and we're going to start edge highlighting around here, shield design, and then a little moon crescent. And then we'll get on to, just for fun, put a little glimmer in the gem right there, just a tiny one. Show it's reflective. That gem right there. And then, inside where we drew the blue line, we're going to try to etch a thinner white line. So you just trace back. I like to dot it a little bit. And that way it looks like a lightning bolt with a blue glow. And just keep going around like that. Now we're going to use some Army Painter Ash Gray. And this is just going to be for the parts. There's some wrinkles in his little black armor suit. So we're just going to highlight those folds. Now, we're going to take our little guy off the base here, and we're going to take our dry brush, a little bit of ash gray, wipe most of it off, and we'll start dry brushing top of the texture there. Now you do this until you have it up to where you want and look. Just don't get it on the gold armor. Now for the final step, because I think this guy is done, I'm going to take some black. And I'm going to take what they used to call a large dry brush, and I'm just going to paint the rim black. I just want the edge of the brush to glide along the rim of the base. Sometimes you might go over, do it twice to get that nice solid look. I like using the larger brush because it creates one smooth application. Now without touching the rim because it's still wet, there's our Stormcast Annihilator, looking quite good. Well, thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Labs, and we'll see you next time.